September 22nd, 2000, Anaheim, California.
It's another magical day at the happiest place on Earth, Disneyland.
4-year-old Brandon Tucker and his family arrive at the famous theme park to celebrate his mother's birthday. Everyone is excited for the fun awaiting them, and as always, the magic of Disneyland does not disappoint. The Zuckers spent the whole day exploring the park and having a blast, but just as they were about to leave, they decided to hop on one last ride, the Roger Rabbit Cartoon Spin. It seemed like the perfect way to end their Disneyland adventure. So when they reached the front of the line, Brandon, his older brother, and his mom got into one of the cartoonish cars, while his father and grandmother got into the one behind them. Soon the ride started chugging down the tracks. The boys were obviously excited for the cars to start spinning, but as soon as they did start spinning, everything went horribly wrong. For some reason, the force of the spinning cart threw little Brandon from the vehicle, and he fell straight onto the track where the other cars were quickly approaching. It all happened so fast that there was no time to stop the ride, and within seconds, the next car carrying his dad and his grandma pinned Brandon to the tracks. With his body folded forward at the waist, and the full weight of the car pushing into his back, Brandon was dragged a full 10 feet before the ride was forced to stop. But the horror didn't end there. It took a whole 10 minutes for staff to get him out from under the car, and by then the damage had already been done. Brandon had already gone several minutes without a pulse or breathing. In that time, he suffered severe brain damage, and even though he survived the accident for a while, he was never able to fully recover. He never walked or spoke again. Brandon lived out the rest of his life in a long-term care facility for kids with brain injuries, until he passed away in his mother's arms 8 years after the tragic accidents. All because his family wanted to take a trip to Disneyland. After a detailed investigation by the State Division of Occupational Safety and Health, they concluded that the Disneyland employees did not put Brandon into the ride properly. Since he was so small, he was supposed to be the furthest one from the entryway of the car, but instead he was positioned right next to it. Plus, they didn't even fully lower the lap bar to keep Brandon strapped in. The state ordered Disneyland to make big changes to the ride safety procedures, including putting in sensor equipment below each car to automatically stop them if anything goes wrong. But the thing about Brandon Zucker's horrible accident at Disneyland that day is that it wasn't just some one-time fluke. This wasn't just an extremely unlucky accident. It was all part of a terrifying trend. In the years leading up to Brandon's tragedy, there were way more accidents than usual happening at the park, which was crazy because Disneyland was expected to be the standard for theme park safety. It had always been considered the most secure theme park in the country. People trusted Disneyland because they went above and beyond to keep their kids safe. So what happened? Why had the happiest place on Earth suddenly become a bright and shiny death trap? Well, as it turns out, most of these accidents started soon after Disneyland hired the most powerful, the most influential, the most ruthless consulting company out there, a consulting company called McKinsey. You may remember McKinsey from when they pushed Purdue Pharma to sling OxyContin to the masses, causing the opioid epidemic, or when McKinsey offered consulting to Enron. Enron was created by an ex-McKinsey employee. Yes, this is the consulting company that Disneyland hired, and it's a stark reminder of what happens when you make a deal with the devil. This video is based on the book When Mackenzie Comes to Town, which goes into all the evil, all the tragedy, all the suffering that happens when Mackenzie comes to town. We'll link to the book below, so stay dangerous, subscribe for more, and this is exactly what happens when Mackenzie comes to Disneyland. And really fast guys, if you want to get something for yourself or a loved one that no one else is gonna have, then you gotta check out Holzkern. Holzkern makes these super unique wooden watches and natural jewelry that no one else is gonna have. One of the problems of shopping for me is that I hate wearing stuff other people have. That's why I really appreciate Holzkern because their stuff is truly unique. And with Valentine's Day just around the corner, they have plenty of products that make great gifts, like these beautiful earrings that I got my girlfriend. They're plated in real gold and she loves them. And this super unique purse that's made out of real stone on the outside and genuine Italian leather on the inside, while still being very light. She loves nature, so these were perfect for her, and I got myself this watch that's made out of real dark maple wood. Very pretty, it's got a solar movement, it's got a swappable bezel, while not breaking the bank. And all this stuff comes with a 24-month warranty and a 24-day money-back guarantee. Holzkern is giving my viewers 15% off, so you can find the perfect gift that's really gonna stand out. Just go to holzkern.com/JakeTran to get 15% off your purchase with promo code JAKE15. That's holzkern.com/JakeTran for 15% off with code JAKE15. By the 1990s, Disneyland had been open for more than 4 decades and had become the most famous theme park in America. Every year, millions of visitors from all over the world came to experience the magic and joy of Disneyland, and the park was turning a massive profit. But then in 1994, things started changing. That year, Disneyland got a new top executive named Paul Pressler. Paul thought that it was time to make even more money. It was time to squeeze every last penny out of the park as possible. And so he decided to hire the best guys out there to help, McKinsey & Company. McKinsey was founded back in 1926, and since then they've become the most powerful, the most influential consulting firm on the planet. And what exactly is this vague thing called consulting? Well, it's actually very simple. Corporations want to make more profit, so they hire McKinsey to tell them what to do to make more money. And shockingly, it works. McKinsey has a track record of making their clients very, very rich, no matter the costs. And that is why McKinsey has been able to sink their teeth into everyone. From trillion-dollar companies like Microsoft to government entities like the US Department of Energy, which is responsible for America's nukes. And so Paul Pressler thought who better than McKinsey to make Disneyland more profitable. And so they signed the contract, and McKinsey proceeded to keep a close eye on the operations of Disneyland for over a year. After that year passed by, McKinsey came back to Paul with a plan for how the park could bring in more money than ever before, and their plan could not have been more genius. See, a really big expense for theme parks like Disneyland is maintenance, making sure the rides are well maintained and safe for visitors. The problem was, Disneyland was putting their most experienced employees who had the most knowledge about the rides in charge of keeping the rides safe, which was costing them a lot of money. Senior employees cost a lot of money. And so McKinsey's recommendation was simple. Disneyland should use a technique called reliability-centered maintenance. It was a cool sounding strategy. It sounded all technical and fancy. It was based on a legit procedure originally used by the aviation industry to track maintenance histories over time. But in reality for Disneyland, it was all about saving money on these expensive maintenance costs. According to McKinsey, all Disneyland needed to do was fire these expensive experienced employees and hire less knowledgeable outside contractors who charge way less. Less maintenance costs more money, simple. But obviously, it wouldn't be a good look for Disneyland to just fire these experienced employees responsible for keeping everyone safe. But McKinsey had it all thought out for their clients. The first step was transferring all of Disneyland's maintenance workers to the overnight graveyard shift. Then Disneyland could keep a much smaller, less experienced group that would handle mechanical breakdowns of rides during the day. But lots of people didn't agree with these changes. A former maintenance supervisor at the park said, "There's nothing wrong with saving money, but not at the expense of your prime objective, which is to keep the place running safely." But according to McKinsey, that made no logical sense. Why should Disney keep paying people to check rides every day if none of them were breaking down? One employee who worked at Disneyland for 20 years put it plainly, "The reason they don't fail is because we check them every night." But Disneyland didn't listen. They were already on the hook for the giant bill McKinsey was invoicing them. So they followed McKinsey's advice. They fell for that consistency bias, where you want to keep doing things you already committed to even if it's stupid. And by 1997, there was a major cultural shift that focused on economics, being as lean an operation as possible to maximize profit at Disneyland. The message was do more with less. And the results were deadly. Christmas Eve 1998, 10:40 a.m. A man named Luan Dawson, his wife and their son were enjoying their morning at Disneyland when they decided to get on a ride called the Columbia, a vintage 84-foot ship that runs on an underwater track. Docking a ship of this size requires special training, but on this particular day, a supervisor with no experience filled in for an employee that was out sick. As the boat was hurtling towards the dock, she tied a rope to the middle hitch on the boat, but she did it way too soon. The power of the moving vessel tore the metal piece loose, which was unfortunately connected to a chunk of rotting wood. The boat's speed meant that that chunk of wood and metal shattered with the force of an exploding bomb, sending fragments of debris flying through the air. The debris hit Luan Dawson first, killing him instantly. His wife, who was sitting next to him, was also severely disfigured from the blast, and it all happened right in front of their young son. The incident brought a lot of negative attention to Disneyland. The Dawson family's lawyer insisted that the accident happened because of Disneyland's cost-cutting efforts at the advice of McKinsey. He said that Disneyland had fired all their ride leads, who were the highly paid safety experts that were assigned to each ride. This included the ride for the Columbia. Not to mention all the experienced maintenance workers who had been switched over to the overnight shift, so none of them were around to help with problems throughout the day.
Disneyland knew or should have known that making extensive cutbacks in their safety and maintenance programs would ultimately have devastating effects on the safety of the public,
the family's lawyer said. But still, Disneyland refused to listen, and so that incident became the first of many. It had barely been a year, and Disneyland had already claimed its first life after McKinsey came to town. A little over a year later, the Space Mountain roller coaster, one of the park's most popular rides, was taking a spin when one of its wheels suddenly got dislodged from the track. This jolted the ride to a sudden halt and badly injured 9 passengers in the process. When an investigation into the accident was conducted, they found, what do you know, poor maintenance to be the cause. It was only a couple of months earlier when Brandon Zucker had been crushed at that other ride. And even though the park swore that they cleaned up their acts, after so much tragedy in such a short time, the accidents kept coming. Summer 2003, Disneyland employees report a weird clicking noise coming from the Big Thunder Mountain roller coaster. Even after mechanics tried to fix the issue, the clicking noise continued. A note was put down that the roller coaster shouldn't be used until they figured out the issue. But it was used anyways. So on September 5th, 22-year-old Marcelo Torres and his friends got on the ride, completely oblivious to his history of mechanical problems. The train ride departed, and just as it went around a curve, the axle rod broke. The piece wedged itself between the track and the ride, pushing the first car over and crushing Marcelo Torres to death. 10 other riders were injured as well. When the state looked into the accident, they found that once again it was due to poor maintenance and employee training issues. It was obvious that Disneyland was falling apart, and its parkgoers were paying the ultimate price. But who could be responsible? Well, there was one thing connecting all these fatal accidents: McKinsey & Company. But do you think McKinsey took responsibility for these accidents or got punished in any way? Nope. The Disney Corporation is still working with McKinsey as late as 2022. Before making this video, I actually talked to an ex-Disneyland employee, and she told me about all the measures they take to make sure no one sees anything bad happening at the happiest place on Earth. If a visitor is absolutely wasted, or if someone has a medical emergency or is too rowdy, there are hidden pathways alongside all the common areas with hidden doors, where Disneyland security will grab the person and take them out of sight as fast as possible so nothing corrupts the other visitors' impression of Disneyland. So if they're that maniacal about maintaining their perfect image, it's no surprise that today, no one even knows or remembers these brutal deaths and accidents. Disneyland has managed to completely erase its dark history of deaths and injuries in the park. So what if they accidentally killed a bunch of people in the name of saving a dime? Who can stay mad at the happiest place on Earth? And as for McKinsey, they never faced any repercussions for providing this advice that led to these deaths. Nobody ever looked twice at McKinsey. And that is McKinsey's specialty. They offer advice that ruins the lives of millions, and yet they always walk away scot-free every single time. You see, Disneyland wasn't the only business that McKinsey turned into a death trap for profits. Nope. Just look at what happened when McKinsey consulted ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. McKinsey was brought in to help them figure out how to save money on illegal immigration. And McKinsey's recommendations were so cruel and inhumane that they even made ICE workers feel uncomfortable. McKinsey suggested that the government agency should cut their spending on food and medical care for detainees. They should just scale back the amount of food and medical care they provide, just like they did with ride maintenance at Disneyland. And it's just as disturbing as you can imagine, and we're gonna cover it in a future video in this new series we're doing on McKinsey. But you wanna know who else keeps getting away with it? Will Smith. See, on the surface, Will Smith has done a great job at marketing himself as a super good, genuine guy. But underneath the surface, he has a very dark side to him.
And one of the things that Jada has over him, Will lost it and beat the shit out of Jada. And that's when I see Dwayne and having anal sex with Will.
Let me process that for a second. Who was on top?
So at the time, Charlie the Rat Mack was kind of his bodyguard, you know? And, Will gave him a nod, and Charlie hit this guy so hard, like blood gushed out his eye.
And we uncover it all in our new documentary on our other channel, How to Get Away With It, that you can watch right now by clicking the card on the screen. Click the card on the screen to watch this juicy documentary now.